Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission Podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and we are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through this wild life and with your relationship with Christ. Now, I'm usually here with my co host and sister, Rachel Smith, but she's moving for the 87th time. So she's going to be out for a little bit. But I am here with a very, very special guest who knows my co host. And she has homeschooled four children over the course of 20-ish years. And she's here to share her experience and all of her knowledge with us today. And it is a great honor that I introduce you to my mom, Pam Smith.
Hello. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here today, Mom.
You're welcome.
And she is calling in from sunny South Florida, as you can see. She's right at the beach with the waves rolling in, and hopefully she can, be here for our conversation, not get too distracted by the waves and the turtles and all that. Just kidding. Obviously, it's a beautiful background, but she is calling from Florida, which if you listen back to the last couple of episodes where we've talked about homeschooling and introduced this topic, a lot of my reference points were from the state of Florida. And it is because I'm from Florida and my mom is, or at least has lived there for a very long time and homeschooled the majority of the time in Florida. So, anyway, there is so much that listeners can learn from you. And I'm really excited that you're here to share your expertise and that you agreed and said yes. So let's just jump into it. I really want to start with what motivated you to homeschool? There's obviously a lot of different routes that you could have taken. So why did you go the homeschooling route?
Well, it all started when we had our firstborn, your oldest brother, Ryan, who was our only child for 11 years. And we put him in public kindergarten. And immediately we were just shocked with how the classroom ran. Back then, they were trying something called a pod system. So they had a big giant room, like a gymnasium, and four groups of kids in each corner. And a teacher would teach, each corner was a classroom. And so it was very distracting. And Ryan, I guess being an only child for so many years, just was not used to all the noise. And he was very frustrated. It was very hard for him to pay attention and learn in that environment. So halfway
So
through,
it was a
we
big room. It was like
yeah,
one big room, and
yeah,
then there was just corners of kids in
yeah.
every corner.
It was like a big gymnasium, and and each corner was a classroom. It was
Wow.
all, I think, the four kindergarten classrooms.
Okay.
And it was just very difficult for any of the kids. They called it the pod system. I
Hmm.
guess it was to save room, and maybe some of the teachers, helped each other. I'm not sure, but it did not work for Ryan. He was a very, well, you know him. He's very quiet and laid back, and he used to come home like a Mexican jumping bean. And he just he didn't thrive in that environment. So we immediately started looking for alternatives. And since we only had one child and we were both working, we opted for Christian school. We hadn't even heard of homeschool back then. um, I don't even know if it was many were doing it, because that would have been like in the 70s.
I was just going to
um,
say, what time period was this? Late 70s, early
yeah,
80s?
kindergarten, he was born in 73, so it'd been like 78,
Okay.
79. So it was very difficult, but we researched and we found what we thought was a good Christian school. So we put him in there, and it went well for several years. And some things came up, and we ran into some issues, doctrinal issues with that school. So we found another school we put him in, and everything went great for several years. But you always, realize you have different doctrines um,
Okay.
than than even though a church school might say they're non-denominational, they still are run by a church and will have those doctrines. So sometimes you run into those issues, or just you get a bad teacher, different issues. So
Mhm.
by middle school, we were running into problems with him. One of the main things is he was bored. He was very advanced. He could remember things easily, and he didn't need to hear something 10 times. And most of the time in traditional school, they teach to the lowest denominator. So they repeat things a lot. And so the kids that are advanced, unless they're in advanced classes, they're kind of held behind.
Mhm.
So I ran into, or I'd met a friend, your Aunt Pam Scarlotta, and she was having issues as well with her son, who was a similar age. And she heard about homeschooling. So she
Okay.
was the first one to tell me about homeschooling. And that was probably um, in around, I think, 1983 or 84 when I first heard about it. And so she was on a research mission, and I went along with her.
Mhm.
And we both started homeschooling. But I just wanted to say the first and foremost, we chose Christian school at the time. That was only our alternative to public school, because we wanted to our children to have a Christian education. We felt
Mhm.
strongly impressed by the Lord to do our best to bring our children up in biblical ways. And that's one of the reasons traditional public school did not meet that need.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's been so many suppressions in public school about the Bible and biblical things, and I just can't imagine these days
Oh, yeah.
being in
Yeah.
public school. I mean, it wasn't even near like it is now. Back then it was, actually a much safer place. But with Pam Scarlotta, we were researching a lot of things, and we did find that um, there were just all these secularism, humanism um, things coming up, and
Mhm.
we started to see them. So that's why we said,
Yeah.
if we can't even get satisfied with Christian school, then we're going to try homeschooling. So that was about probably 1984, 83 or 84, because I was pregnant with Nathan when I started homeschooling Ryan.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was actually working at the time. I had given notice, but they needed a couple of months. So the first few months, he was about 11. So I was directing him from work before I retired. And, he was very good at being self-directed. He loved to read. He was kind of like you and liked to get his stuff done. And it also gave him more time. He was very involved in the Boy Scout program when it was different at that time. So it gave him
Mhm.
a lot of time to do that, and enabled him to become an Eagle Scout in 2 years, which is usually a 4 to 6 year um, job.
Mhm.
But he could spend a lot of time doing that. He learned so much. It was just a real benefit to you know get for him to be homeschooled.
Mhm.
There really was little information back then. So we just had to wing it. And with the Lord's help, um, I feel we were able to, he led us to the right places. When we first started, there was no law in the state of Florida. Homeschoolers were considered to be under the private school law. So what we did was set up a little private school, and we homeschooled under it. But then the state was coming after, or going after, a lot of people, mostly pastors, because they traveled and brought their children with them. And they were going after them for the truancy laws. So um, my husband and I, your dad, we got involved in politics. That was our first encounter with politics, and we started lobbying our state representatives to pass a law. And it took about a year and a half, and we got a decent law. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what we want would be no um, having to answer to the government at all, but it was okay. So we accepted that. We even found out the representative Daniel Webster, who wrote the bill, he ended up homeschooling his family as
Hmm.
well. So that was really cool. But most of the representatives were very open to it. Many of them had never heard of it either.
Oh, wow.
So it was a real learning.
What did the law entail? What was the bill about?
It gave homeschoolers the I guess you'd say permission
Okay.
to homeschool, and there was the accountability was we had to do annual testing and give a report to the state.
Okay.
So at the end of each year, um, there's so many over time, we found that there was, through the homeschool organizations, we all got together. We hired people to do testing. We had help with evaluators. I'll get to that in another when we get on another topic. But there was just a lot of camaraderie and a lot of others that would help.
Mhm.
So at the end of the year, we do the test, a report and the testing, and we
Mhm.
turn that in. And I don't even think they looked at it. We never hear anything except thank you.
Sure.
You're graduated to the next year.
And wasn't truancy was a big issue back then too, right? If
Yes,
they
yeah,
found you at the store, I mean, where'd we go back then? Kmart?
yeah. It was very scary because if we went in public places during the day, people were always saying, "Why are your kids out of school?" They try to interrogate you guys as well. But after the
It's
law
it's
was
such a
passed,
different world now, isn't
I
it? So
know
funny.
after the law was passed, we didn't worry about it. But
Mhm.
sometimes I'd say, Ryan, get down if we went by a cop car or something, because we did,
What are they gonna do? Take the kid to jail? Go drop him
I
off
don't
at
know what
school?
they do, but we just heard horror stories of how they'd come after pastors' kids and take them
Mm.
away.
Okay,
Um,
so it
you
was
know,
like a
they
CPS
they yeah
situation.
they call CPS on them saying they had them out of school. Um, but after the law was passed, I will say that even though we had the law, many of us still joined homeschool organizations, mainly because they would help us keep records, and they would offer discounts or they would offer curriculum. Um, and especially in high school, I don't think I worried about it till high school, but we would get a nice transcript from
Mhm.
what looked like an official school that
Mhm.
we could submit to colleges.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a benefit. Um,
And like an
after,
umbrella, right? It was
yes, an
referred to as
umbrella
an
school.
umbrella school. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mentioned that on the last episode because we talked about college, high school years and college and kind of how in many states you can do dual enrollment or early enrollment. And as a
yeah,
homeschooler, if you are in a state that has an umbrella program, you can work under that umbrella. I want to circle back real quick though to what you mentioned about the curriculum changing and the humanism part of it because we
yes,
mentioned actually I guess I want to say it was 2 episodes ago that one of the big reasons for many people choosing to homeschool is because they have control over the curriculum and what their children are taught. And that back when you made the decision to start homeschooling was the time in which evolution began to be put into the school system prior to the 70s. I mean, there was barely a mention of it, except that one person wanted to teach it in a school and they brought it to the courts. And then after that, it was legalized to technically teach evolution. So then in the 80s, they really rolled this out. And you were really right in the middle of that because you weren't
Right.
taught evolution when you were in school, right?
Not the way that it's taught now or back then. No, it
Mhm,
when we were in school, we had prayer, pledge allegiance. You know, the Bible was on the teacher's desk.
mm,
And there was discipline. It was just totally different.
mhm,
And it was education. Now, these days, it's a lot of social stuff
mhm.
that they teach. But in addition to evolution, there also, like I said, was secular humanism. We could see that they were starting to um, just focus on, you know, humanism to me is a religion.
Tell
We
me a little
felt
bit about what does that mean for someone who doesn't know what secular humanism is? What is
it's
that?
when people we put humans first before God.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay.
it's what I want. Or
Mhm,
back then there would be examples of, if, you know, 20 people were in a boat, and you had to get rid of two of them, and one of them was disabled and another one was a child, or somebody was overweight, or, you know, some type of disability. Who would you get rid of? And of course, the students would say, oh, the fat one, or the disabled one, or the kids, you know.
was that the right answer? Is that's the answer they were looking for?
Yeah, that's what they
That
were
sounds like
trying to
a
teach.
that sounds
They
like
were
a
trying to teach,
eugenics agenda, no?
right, survival of the fittest, just thinking of yourself, instead of others. You
Mm,
know, it's just totally opposite to us of biblical um, manners and biblical laws, and, you know, like the Ten Commandments. They just don't honor them anymore. It's more
mhm,
about me.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's only gotten worse.
right. So that was what we were beginning to see in school. And like I said, with Ryan, just our short time in um kindergarten was chaos.
Mm,
And I just couldn't see how he was going to learn even what they were teaching in that environment. Now, I think, you know, they figured out that the pod system didn't work and they went back to regular classrooms, I understand, but we just never went back to public school after that.
mhm,
Um, as I said, he was in Christian school where we knew he was being taught the Bible and manners and very disciplined, following rules.
mhm.
So,
That's kind of the problem with public school, though, isn't it? That they're always experimenting.
yes.
Like the students are lab rats in the sense that they're experimenting on them with, does this curriculum work? Does this structure work? Does this, they're, I mean, I guess you've got to test things on somebody, but it almost is to the point that, you're putting your children in the position that anything could happen. And they could be taught anything at any time by any person. And I think
Hmm.
that that's something that really you recognize right away. No, my child is not an experiment. He's not functioning in this system well. So that's cool that
Well,
you
and you'll also
got it.
encounter, you know, if you get a bad teacher. I mean, Rachel got a bad teacher. She did go to public high school,
Mhm.
as you know, when she was
Yeah,
the
she
last
talked about
one.
that last episode.
Yeah,
She
and
talked
she
about
wanted
that.
to go, and all it takes is, you know, as a bad teacher, you have a terrible year.
Mhm.
To me, that's just awful, and there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's not. So then you had more kids. You mentioned you
Yeah.
had Nate, then you had me, then you had Rachel.
So
So
some
then you had 4 kids to homeschool.
so some of the challenges then were, I had started teaching. Ryan could read, write, and everything. You know, he was middle school. He was about eighth grade when I started homeschooling. So, um, you know, in one way, he was easy. I hadn't taught the basics of reading, writing, and all that.
Mhm,
You know, but of course, high school does get harder. I will mention though, when he turned 16, we were able to get involved in dual enrollment.
mhm.
And you probably talked about that already then, because
Yeah, I
you
did
did
mention
dual
that
enrollment. Yeah.
3 out of the 4 of us started college
Yeah.
early. So he was the first.
Yeah. So that was, but you didn't have that opportunity if you went to school.
Oh, I didn't
Um,
know that. Okay,
yeah.
so if you went to school, you couldn't do early enrollment or dual enrollment, but if you were homeschooled, you
Well, they
could.
were just starting it. So it wasn't, the public schools were, they really didn't want students to do that because that took away from their money. So they
Mm,
discouraged the dual enrollment. But we homeschoolers jumped on it because, if you were ready, you might as well go on
yeah,
and
why
get
not?
your college education done.
Yeah, why waste
And
4 years homeschooling when you can
right.
only do 2?
Yeah. And most of the time, college classes are geared toward that subject. I mean, when I went back to school, I found some classes to be a joke, but um,
They're
most
so
of them,
basic. Yeah, they're so
yeah.
basic those first 2 years anyway.
Once you get past those, then you're heavy duty into your major and it's very educational and technical and whatever. But
Mhm.
anyway, so he was easier. When you guys came along and you have to teach him to read, I hadn't done that before, and it was scary because um, we didn't have a whole lot of choices back then like you do now. Um, but I chose a curriculum called Christ-centered curriculum that somebody had just written,
Okay.
a lady at a Christian school had written. And it was so detailed. I was tearing my hair out, and I found it difficult um, with my son, second born son. Um, but I found out also boys don't learn the same as girls. But that's one of the big advantages of homeschool is you can tailor it to your children's needs.
Mhm.
Um,
And
so
learning styles and
yes, and
every
learning
every
style.
every child's a little bit different, even between girls and boys, even between girls and girls,
Yeah,
you know?
that's true. But I will say from experience, girls are a little bit easier in the beginning. And I believe I did a lot of studying and found that boys are more proficient in large motor skills in the early years, whereas girls are more proficient in fine motor skills. I mean, you sit you three down to color, and Nathan would be done in 2 minutes, and Harley color and lines, but he was done. He said he was finished, and that was all he wanted to do. And you and Rachel would sit there for an hour and color a
Mhm.
beautiful multicolored portrait. um, and that's just the difference between boys and girls.
Mhm.
He's always been more athletic, and there are subjects that he was, much better at, but most of the time, I found it more challenging to teach uh, girls who were more like me, probably in my learning styles
Mhm.
than boys.
You mean less challenging?
Yes, less challenging. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Yes.
Yes, yes. I could totally understand that. Brooke is only 4 and a half. She's not quite into it all yet, but she definitely can sit down and color for an hour, sometimes 2. She'll color things. Now she's using scissors. She'll cut it out. She's very creative. She loves to do all that stuff, play with Play-Doh, make and create things. So I'm seeing a lot of that already. And I've told you that when it comes to reading, she likes to write. She likes to practice writing her letters and she likes to actually sit down and do school. So it's going to be interesting to see the difference between, that and Wild Man.
Yeah. You will see a big difference. I mean, it's good. I don't want it to sound like it's a bad thing.
Mhm,
It's difficult in that if your style is different than the child's style, then you have to research and find out and get to their level
mhm,
and use something that works with them. Like what one curriculum for one child may not work for another.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
if I found I had liked to use the rod and staff
Oh,
English,
yeah. Oh, yeah, I
which
remember
was
that.
very detailed and um,
Is that the one with
you
the
know
diagramming sentences?
diagramming sentences, learning everything you can imagine about grammar. And you liked it. Rachel was like, she'd do it, but she didn't enjoy it. And
Mhm.
Nathan just struggled with it,
Mhm.
to remember all that.
Mhm.
Um, like I said, though, we didn't have a whole lot of choices back then.
So that
Finally,
that is a benefit to today is there are so
yes,
many curriculums and a,
back
a lot
then
of
we,
people will go to homeschool conferences and they can
yeah,
actually look and see what the curriculums are out there because I mean you could drop some money on curriculum.
right. Well, back then, our most of our only choices were whatever Christian schools were using,
Hmm.
or public school books.
Hmm.
So,
Saxon math.
we used, well, Saxon came along. It was to me more, it was easier and more geared toward homeschoolers than other regular math books. But we used a Becca, Bob Jones, a lot of the mainstream Christian school books. And it was like, it was so much repetition, but you don't need that in homeschool. You do in a big classroom to make sure all the kids are getting it. But
Hmm.
in homeschool, you don't need to do all that repetition.
Hmm.
So it made it a little difficult to gear it down. It took me several years to realize that you don't have to do every page in a book.
Hmm.
So it probably was tough on y'all at the beginning till they started creating more stuff. We eventually went to the life packs. It was called Alpha Omega back then. Remember those? Used to
Oh
work in
yeah.
like workbooks, and
Yeah.
then they put it on the computer.
Switched on
And
Schoolhouse.
yes, no, it wasn't switched on. It was still Alpha Omega, but on the on the computer.
Okay.
But that was like well into the 90s.
That was still early days for us to be using computers. Sometimes I think about
Oh
that
yeah.
you were an early adopter to
We
computers.
didn't, when I first started homeschooling, we did not have the internet. Everything was done by snail mail. If I
Mhm.
wanted to find out anything, I subscribed to newsletters from other organizations.
Real
Um,
mail, just so everybody knows what she's
yeah,
saying.
real mail.
Real mail.
We would subscribe. I subscribed to a lot of different homeschooling groups and organizations to get all the information I could. Um, we depending on what state we lived in, I joined the statewide group, and we did have curriculum fairs, and those were very, very helpful to go there and look at the curriculum. And they were each year there'd be more new stuff, more geared toward homeschoolers. So that was a lot of fun, very interesting, and I'd be able to see something a lot of times right away. I could say, "Oh boy, I'm glad I saw that. You would not do good with that."
Mhm.
So, and then at some of the curriculum fairs, they would have seminars. We could sign up for classes, and there would be English teachers, math, all kind of different teachers teaching them to give us guidance. And so that was helpful. We just soaked up all the information we possibly could, going to various seminars and reading all kind of newsletters.
Mhm.
And then it probably was in the mid 90s that started getting on the internet.
Mhm.
But even then, in the beginning, I don't know if it was Google. I'm trying to think how we searched. It was different in the beginning. They didn't
Yahoo?
have all
Maybe
the
Yahoo
information,
search?
huh?
Did Yahoo have a search maybe?
Yeah, it
AOL
might
had
have
a
been.
search?
Yeah, yeah. I can't even remember. I was mostly on. In the beginning, it was I think AOL parody. I can't remember the name of it.
Prodigy?
Prodigy, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I found other homeschoolers on that. It was more like a chat board.
Oh yeah, we got to talk about your forum. You joined, I think it was homeschoolmoms.com or something like that, right? And it was a forum back then?
I was on a lot of forums and a lot of
Okay.
groups.
Okay.
So um the one of the benefits for me of homeschooling was we moved a lot, remember?
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah, I do remember. We moved six
actually I
times
think
in 6 years.
yes, it was a benefit for you all, because if you'd been in traditional school, that would have been so hard,
Oh yeah.
you know, getting
Yeah.
in and out of school. And in different states, they're at different levels in each grade.
Mm-hmm.
And not only just physically, but even mentally, it's so hard. My dad was in the Navy, and we moved every 2 years growing up, and it was hard. So I was so thankful that we homeschooled, because that our your education didn't change. It
Mm-hmm.
was all the same, always the same. We
Mm-hmm.
knew where to pick up where when it was time to start again after our move. So that was a real benefit for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom with that.
Yes, I was going to say one of the biggest benefits is freedom
Mm-hmm.
to do what you feel is best for your family. And if, as Christians, we could teach you what the Bible said and not have any interference from the government or government schools.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So,
Now, something that a lot of people are concerned about when it comes to homeschooling is the socialization. Of course, they always say, "How are your kids going to get socialized?" And being around other kids and families, and what is mom going to do? I think that there's this mindset that everybody's just like sitting in their house alone forever doing this homeschool thing. But let's talk about community. How did you build a community? You've already shared a lot of that so far, but how did you build community?
what we would do, first thing when we moved, we would find a church right away. I mean, probably within the first couple weeks, start visiting churches. And let's see, by then we may have been on the internet, and I could find out some information about churches, but I would try to find out if they had other homeschooling moms, not necessarily a homeschooling group, but other homeschooling moms. And if they did, then, we join that church and start getting together with other moms. And some churches had homeschool groups, and it just was a big, big asset to be involved in a homeschool group back then, just for the support, for the information, and then to get together with other families. We would meet in the parks, and we started doing physical education together. Um, most of us were very creative and responsible, take on the responsibility of teaching. Um, and some moms would watch the little ones so that other moms could teach the school age children.
Mm.
Um, so we did a lot of that. Uh, that was important to me, to find other homeschool moms and an organization if possible
Mhm.
whenever we moved
Mhm.
through church, because
So,
that
and
was
some
important
people
to
might
us.
call over time those started to have more name definitions like a co-op, homeschool co-op, or a homeschool
Yeah,
group. In the beginning, there you might have just had people you got together with, other moms you got together with, and then that kind of evolved to joining homeschool groups and
right.
or what we might call co-op today.
Well, I'd always try to be uh, have a group, be involved with a group in a church, because it'd be smaller and we could really support each other. Then I'd look for like a statewide or even citywide. When we lived in Charlotte, they actually had, I think, 4 homeschool organizations, but a lot of times they weren't Christian organizations. So they might be helpful because they'd have curriculum fairs and um, physical education classes and stuff. If they weren't teaching you all, values that biblical values that we or non-biblical values, or teaching things that we didn't agree with, we would participate.
Mhm.
And if we found that we didn't like an organization, then we would try to get our local church group to help us, with participation, start a little co-op and teach classes there at the school as needed.
Mhm.
As children get older, it gets a little tougher in the higher level classes, and some moms find it very challenging.
Mhm.
So we would get together and hire tutors sometimes to teach a specific class, like higher math, or I taught some myself. I taught biology, um, lab, public speaking. And I found a lot of those courses really helped me. As you know, I went back to college myself, and that public speaking class that I taught, well, I taught a couple classes, and really helped me a lot
It's
when
funny
I
that
went
you
back to
mentioned that
school.
because Rachel and I mentioned it last time we talked about Tony Carboni teaching math. And then we also mentioned that you taught some classes and we talked about that speech class. That speech class was great. And you
Yeah.
did a writing lab too. You did a
Yes.
writing lab. And
Yeah.
I remember doing biology lab and remember you kept all the little critters in your closet. What are you going to do? Your homeschool, you know?
Yeah, that's right. They were all in boxes in
In
the closet.
formaldehyde. So,
Yes.
it's like that's the life.
That's right.
We had a lot of fun doing that though. And I do want to jump on what you said about you going back to school. You went back to school when I went to college and we actually crossed over. We took theater appreciation together and
Yes.
that was so much fun. We had to go see a really strange play as our
Yes.
homework but we had a good time.
Well, and it was a very secular course, and we were able to talk about it.
Yes, yes, it
um,
was.
and support each other through some of the craziness of that. But that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just back then. That was probably nothing compared to what they're learning these days in school, in college.
Yeah, I mean, it was ramping up at that time. It was
Yeah.
just beginning because we're talking early 2000.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you were in dual enrollment, and then
Hmm.
I guess about 2 years later, when you were in college, or you'd gone to the transfer to the university, then at one time four of us were in college at the same time. So
Oh,
that
that's
was real
true because
interesting.
he went first and then
Yep.
me, then you, then Rachel. That's funny.
Yeah.
We were
So
all in
that
school
was
and
real
uh,
interesting.
all at different schools too.
And so we can mention that even though I didn't have a college education, you can still homeschool.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. If you can read and write, and you love the Lord and your children, God will give you the ability and the skills and the tools to do it.
So she's selling herself short, you guys. She's being too humble. I have to mention what she went back to school for was computer programming because she's a genius. Who goes back to school for computer programming as an adult? Only someone who's really smart. So don't sell yourself short.
Well, when computers came out in about 1990, I think it was, I remember we lived in Charlotte, and I got that was the first time I was on the internet. But it was so different back then. There was no graphics. It was all just typing words. So it
It
was
was a
different.
different time for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Definitely. So what would you say is your favorite part about homeschooling? What did you enjoy the most?
Well, I'd say my favorite thing is the freedom to do whatever you want to do. No one can tell you what you can do. So you can tailor it how you see fit to your family, to each child. Another thing would be you're home with your kids all the time. I mean, it does get tiring and you need a break.
What are you talking
Um,
about? You got tired of us?
but you I just think of all of the, especially these days, I see kids get on the bus at like 7 a.m. and they don't get home till 3 p.m.
3 a.m.
3 p.m. My grandson, he gets home at like 5:30, and then he probably has homework. And then if there's anything going on in the evening, then they hardly see their kids. So
It's like being a worker already. It's like
yeah,
he's employed, like he has a job.
yeah.
He goes to school longer than most people work.
I know. It's crazy. I mean, school did not used to be as long as it is now. They've had to change it because they add so much to it. Instead of, if they just taught the basics, what's necessary, they could probably have school from 8 to one, but there's just
But
so much else that they add to it.
they partially do this as a way for parents to have somewhere where kids are. So they want the government wants mom and dad
Yes.
working.
Yes, it's
So
become
they're
a babysitting thing as well. They have the after
Mhm.
school care. So, they're trying to meet those needs and keep everybody employed, I guess. But
And they're also trying to create workers. I mean, that's what
mhm,
they want us to be is tax paying workers. So you got to train them up to
right.
go
But
sit down and work.
so I found it rewarding most of the time to be home with you guys, to be able to do what we wanted to when we wanted, to go do field trips, learn historical things. It just it was a real blessing to I still remember our times when you guys were little, reading our books before lunch, Little House on the Prairie, and then going and cooking our food, and it was a blast.
Mhm.
Um,
I remember that too. And the Moody Brothers books, we did that
yes,
series. Anne of
yeah.
Green Gables series. We did so many different ones that,
Five
you
Little
know.
Peppers and How They Grew. You should read that to Brooke.
There you go. That's a good idea.
Also, the some of the other my favorite things were the camaraderie between other homeschool moms. Um, it does, you just have a natural uh, relation with them because they're homeschooling too, and there's just an understanding with them, and you make a lot of good close friends during those years, and
Mhm,
also you can do your extracurricular things like piano, music, some of those lessons, painting, art during the day when
mhm,
other people are in school, get that out of the way. That can be part of your school during the day. So, homeschool kids aren't usually up late at night doing homework. They,
mhm,
they, and school can be done, in a couple hours instead of 8 hours a day. Um, Also, you could spend time on the subjects that are needed, or if your child has an interest, um, you remember Matthew Neal, she did homeschool him some, but he was just naturally talented in art. So he
mhm,
was able to, really spend a lot of time on his artwork
mhm,
during those years when he was homeschooled.
mhm,
Also, um, my husband traveled a lot. So when he was home, we could take off school and spend time with him and do a lot of things as a family. Whereas if you guys went to school, you probably wouldn't have seen your dad very much
yeah, probably never would have seen
because
him.
he traveled usually Monday through Thursday many of those years when you were young.
Mhm,
Um, Another benefit is flexibility. You can do school as you see fit. You can personalize the curriculum to each child's need. I think it builds stronger bonds between your family, between members of your family. The siblings depend on each other, hopefully grow up and be best friends.
Grow up and start a podcast together
Yeah.
and talk about everything together. Yeah.
And I
It's funny
know,
it's funny because we grew up together, Rachel and I, so close that our voices sound the same. We had the same
yes, I know.
inflections. And people listen to this podcast and they don't know who is who.
I know, me too. Sometimes I'm listening. Is that Rebecca or Rachel?
Hey, I'm not trying to throw her under the bus, but Rachel's the one that says
Um, okay.
I kid, I kid. But that you could use that to differentiate a little bit. But yeah, I think our voices sound so much the same that Brooke says that to me all the time. She says, "Your voice sounds like Rachel at certain times."
Yeah, you do. And another thing that's, I guess, good about homeschooling are the social aspects of it, social skills. I think that um, we can teach those social skills in a safe environment when our kids are at home. We can control how much social events they're involved in. And that way, if we see anything that's questionable or is affecting them, then we can change it.
Mhm.
You send them off to traditional school or even Christian school, and you don't you don't even know what they're being taught socially.
No, you have
Um,
no idea what kids are talking
right.
about amongst each
Until
other
you
either.
until you start seeing some of that, and how
Mhm.
can you change it if they're in school?
Mhm.
So, and then other people always say, I mean, this was the biggest issue that non-homeschoolers always brought up is, oh man, how do your kids be social? And I used to laugh because, we went to church, we were always getting together. I thought, man, you're social enough. Um,
Too social.
yeah, too social. So I don't, I, I just think that's always funny when people bring that up because that was really never an issue. I guess
I
it
think
might be if people were hermits and didn't get
sure.
out,
I was
but
gonna say it goes back to that image of people thinking that homeschoolers just sit at home by themselves all the time, but that's just not the case. The
no.
vast majority of homeschoolers are involved in groups and some sort of, community learning or get together.
I also think that homeschooling teaches independence. I mean, I see that in all four of you. And also if you have you're geared for higher academic excellence, you achieve it. You become more independent. You work on your own. I mean, it may
Hmm.
take several years. The elementary years is the training years, but as you get to middle and high school, then you become more independent, and you're able to advance in the higher level uh, subjects if you want to.
Hmm.
So,
Hey, if you think about it, all four of your children have graduated with at least bachelor's degrees,
right,
and all four of your kids have started their own businesses too at some point.
right, and one has a master's degree.
We won't say who that one is. And one has a master's degree. There you
Yeah,
go.
right. All of you are very successful in your business or your endeavors. So
Mhm. And in homeschooling now, right? Now
that's
we've
right.
been set up to train up the next generation. And both of my older brothers have homeschooled off and on. We know Rachel's homeschooling because she has been talking about it for the past two, 3 episodes. And then obviously I'm on my way there. My kids are a little young, but we're getting started. So it was a great way to get us into homeschooling too, was to grow up in it and get to see what it's like.
I know. I wondered if you would. I used to think about it if you would homeschool your own children. So it's a real blessing to see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really even know that there's an alternative. It's too crazy out there to
I
send
know.
kids to school.
I just I can't imagine. I pray for my grandchildren every day. It's a different
Yeah,
world.
yeah, yeah. Some of the grandkids are in public school and just different settings. So definitely we pray for them and what they're exposed to in different times in their life. But yeah, homeschooling has so many benefits, but it also can be hard sometimes, I'd
Yes.
say, right?
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about what you think or feel was the most challenging part or parts of homeschooling.
Okay. One of the most challenging things to me was teaching multiple children who are in different grades,
Mm,
and meeting the needs. In the beginning, I wanted to try to teach set subjects together. And of course, reading was easy, not teaching you to read.
mm,
I'm talking about reading class, reading books together.
mhm,
That was easy. But then, um, depending on the grade you're in, you would have to read different books than the others. But also if you're like 2 years apart, it's easier to teach some subjects together. But once you start getting older and in the higher math and science, then you've got to um, separate it, and some kids have to advance in their courses. So that was harder. Keeping up with all the details for some of us that aren't quite as organized as others, keeping all the paperwork and everything that you had to turn into the state. A lot of times we would, I think a lot of homeschoolers feel insecure, and when it comes to teaching upper level classes. So that's why, to meet that need, we sought out professionals, tutors, other homeschool moms who had been teachers,
Mhm,
to teach subjects, and we get together for a co-op. That
mhm,
that really helped and met the need, uh, and would help us feel like we were doing the right thing with our kids. Um, Other issues would be overscheduling, doing too much. Sometimes I'd find that that's what was happening, giving you too many subjects. Some of you found it easy, and some of you did not. And it just takes time to realize what's really necessary. Like I said in the beginning, I used regular textbooks, and there's just so much repetition in them that you don't need to do it all. So that it's just something you have to figure out what's necessary and what's not.
mhm,
Um, Another issue that might be a little difficult is separating being a parent from the teacher. Um, you get, when the mom, you can get frustrated as a mom, you really have to watch it as a teacher. So that's probably a pretty common challenge. It's for the children to respect you as a teacher as well as your mom, and for me to respect each of my children and what they're capable of doing, and my expectations.
mhm.
Um, I found that sometimes pretty challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. It can't be easy to teach different kids at different ages with different learning styles. And
Yes,
it's like, you know, what one can do here and the other one, you're like, yeah, I know you could do this. You're just not applying yourself or whatever the case might be. And it can get
yes,
tough.
yes. The everybody has a different learning style and passion. I don't know if you remember, be working with one of you in one room, and another one would be yelling the answers to something from another room. I don't know. It was fun though.
I remember, particularly with math, if I couldn't figure something out, I would come to you and say, I can't figure this out. And you'd say, okay, let's figure this out. What do you think? And you'd ask me so many questions. I'd be like, just tell me the
I
answer.
know.
Just tell me. But you were like, the whole point is that you're learning. You need to
Right,
learn how to do this.
right. Now that came from my dad. My dad used to do that to me when I was, would come to him with my algebra and calculus and stuff. And after a while, I thought, does he not know it? And is that why he's asking me questions? He did,
Yeah.
but
I had the same question as a kid. So
yeah,
what's the answer? Did you really not know and you just wanted me to figure it out on my own?
sometimes we do have to go look it up.
I can imagine. I mean, math is hard enough as it is. So I couldn't imagine having to know everything about math all of the time as your kids get older. I mean, most of us don't use algebra on a day-to-day basis, so it's not something that's gonna just stick in our brains. So it makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's true. That's true.
Now, what else would you like to share about your experience or maybe some encouraging words for parents that are maybe they're new to homeschooling or struggling?
Um, I would say, if you're just starting out, to start simple. Don't try to overdo things. Don't try to do 10 subjects, uh, and get involved in everything. Start simple. Um, Try to investigate the curriculum and go with something that's easier than like a straight textbook. because if you're a teacher, then it's a different story. I have run into a lot of homeschoolers that moms were teachers. And it's a lot easier for them because they're um, used to having to skim curriculum and figure out what to do. But a lot of them have challenges too. They seem to have more challenges wanting to homeschool their own children.
Mhm.
I'm not sure why, but I found many teachers say, I could never do my own kids. Um, but I don't know. I never thought that. So I thought,
I think they're worried about the structure a lot of times because I've
yeah,
talked to a couple of moms that were elementary school teachers and then they're nervous to homeschool their own kids. And I'm like, why? And they just feel nervous about failing or just about the structure because they think that the day is 8 hours. And I'm like, you don't have to do school for 8 hours, especially not in kindergarten.
that's right. Probably an hour a day for kindergarten is all you really
Yeah,
need. Um,
absolutely.
in starting simple, that's one of the things. And I told Rachel that if you just do 15 minutes, I mean,
Hmm.
it really depends on the child.
Hmm.
Some children, like Brooke, could probably go an hour.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that at that age, though. I think that's, just because then if they like it that much, then you might have to be more involved and spend many hours teaching them when you don't have the time. Um, but they don't need it because they're going
Hmm.
to repeat some of it.
Hmm.
They, I say, start simple. Try not to get too involved in too many things. Um, the I think the main thing is to start your day with prayer and pray and ask the Lord to help you meet the needs of each child, to study and use the curriculum you feel is best for each child, and pat yourself on the back each day that if you get through it. If you don't, you got the next day to catch up. Or many times we would if we had to take off because we'd move, we would just reevaluate what was necessary. Because as I said, if you're using textbooks, there's so much that's not necessary in
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
Get involved with other like-minded homeschoolers. Find a group that you agree with their values and get involved as much as you can. Participate, get your kids involved if you feel you need to. If you don't, then you don't. But a lot of times it helps to encourage your children. Do you feel like when we go on events or physical education or whatever, being involved with small groups encouraged you, helped you
Oh, yeah, definitely.
to want to do stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed
We
that.
and get involved in the community. I don't know if you remember, you guys were involved in singing groups and choral groups, and I
How
think
could I
that helped.
forget?
Yeah, I think all that helped for you to be able to be in front of people in the public and communicate. And
It's funny that it's funny you say that because I used to be very shy
I know
as a
you
child.
were
I
very
was very
shy,
shy, but I think that those things gradually helped me to get
right?
more and more out of my shell, right? Being in a singing group and having to be on stage and sing in front of people, I was terrified. I did not
I
enjoy
know,
that.
I
At the
know.
time, it was scary. I liked singing, but I didn't necessarily want to be in the spotlight. And it took a long time over time to be more comfortable. And now I'm not nervous or worried at all
Well, I think
about talking.
right, all those things add up, over the years of being involved in the community and social
Mhm.
events,
Mhm.
and being involved in church and church events. Because
Mhm.
to me, church was an integral part of your education as well, because they teach the Bible in church as well, um, and in Bible studies that you would go to as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I I find that it all leads to your education as an adult,
Mhm.
being involved in music. Um, we did plays with with groups, and being involved in the tutoring classes. I think it all adds up and
Yeah,
contributes
definitely.
to your ability as an adult.
Absolutely. Now, what about moms feeling overwhelmed and that they never get a minute to themselves?
Yes, it's important that you get away, you get out and have a little time to yourself. When you guys were little, to me, it was a treat to go grocery shopping at 9 o'clock at night after everybody's in bed, just to go to the grocery store by myself with nobody hanging on me or slowing me down, and I could look and read the labels and decide what I wanted. I found that rewarding, but
Yeah.
also trying to get out with other moms, maybe once a month for a dinner or a lunch, or go to homeschool retreats or homeschool curriculum fairs. I think it's important that we communicate with other people, because you support one another. I had
Mhm.
friends I would call and cry and say, I can't do this anymore. It's too hard. I want to quit. And they would encourage me. And by the
Mhm.
time I hung up, I was all refreshed and okay. Um, your husband needs to, will need to watch the kids sometimes, and you just go out and go to a park or go get your nails done or
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
go
say. Get your
do
nails done.
something for yourself so you have a little time to yourself.
Mhm.
Every mom needs that anyway, but I think especially a homeschooling mom, because we have a dual role as a teacher and a mom.
Mhm.
And depending, especially if you have, two, three, four kids, it's overwhelming. Your
Yeah.
whole day is with your children, education or uh, chores or breaking up stuff, meals, every day, the same thing, or meeting other needs wears you out. So you do need a
Mhm.
break now and then. So I encourage moms to try to get out and do something with other moms or for themselves.
Mhm. Yeah. How has your break been? I think you haven't been homeschooling now for probably 20 years at this point because we've all been graduated and moved on. Have you been enjoying your peace and quiet?
I just, as you know, probably in the I forget how many years it was. I still was, even though I was homeschooling you guys, I was working as well at home on the computer.
Mhm.
I started out writing technical books for company, and doing a lot of their writing articles and stuff for them and proofreading. So I was also working at the same time, which was somewhat rewarding because I got paid for that. But that opened the door for me to, I was ready for work when I was done. A lot of homeschool moms, they homeschool their lives and haven't done anything else and they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And I'm finding many of them are going back to college, getting their degree and teaching public school, and then ripping their hair out. But that's what they feel. Well, gosh, I've taught all my life, so I'm just going to get a teaching degree and teach.
Mhm.
And it's quite a different story teaching in the public
Absolutely.
school than teaching at home.
Absolutely.
And some of them have gotten jobs in Christian schools, but apparently the pay isn't near as good as
No, there's a
public school.
100 other jobs you could do to make better money than being a teacher.
Yes, I know it's terrible that education it isn't as rewarding, but
Mhm.
um so by the time I was done homeschooling, I did go, oh, I went to school, but I did go right into the workforce, and um I've been blessed to work from home though.
Mhm. Yep,
I
so you've
would
been
say that.
working since. So what you're trying to say is you never got a break. You're still waiting for your break.
Yes, I still work. I haven't retired yet.
Yeah, it's about time, huh? Here soon, I think. I don't know.
Yes, with
Well,
13, 14,
no one deserves a break more than you.
yes, with 13, 14 grandchildren, I need a break so I can spend more time with them.
Well, yeah, that's the other problem is now you're just watching all our kids, raising them. So I guess you're never going to get a break until
If
you're with the Lord.
uh, sadly, if we all live close together, I could probably just have a little school and teach them all. But
Oh,
you all live in too many different places.
well, I didn't know that was an open opportunity here. So maybe we could start the Pam Smith homeschooling school. Send all the kids, and that'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome, Mom. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And I know that so many people will get so many valuable nuggets out of this and just encouragement that they can do it. They can homeschool, some resources to seek out. Was there anything else you wanted to share before we close?
No, like I said before, if if you're Christian, you can do it with the Lord's help, and just pray and ask him for guidance, and he will give it to you.
Hmm,
That's my main advice for moms.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And thank you all for tuning in and for being on this journey with us. If you would like to follow along outside the podcast, you can do so Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at The Radiant Mission. And today we're going to close with Proverbs 31, verses 28 through 29. This verse certainly reminded me of my mom. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. We're wishing
Oh,
you a radiant week, and we will see you next time.
God
Bye, everyone.
bless. Bye-bye.